All right, what I want to do today is two things. One is I just felt like I needed to go back and a summary of Proverbs. What have we learned? Maybe say it better this way. What did I learn as we went through Proverbs? And just kind of review that a little bit. So I actually went back to all of my summaries, and I did a summary of my summaries. So that's what I want to share with you first. And then actually to do an introduction to First John, where we're going to be going. I did want to mention, in case anybody was curious, this is the study guide that I'm using for First John. 735 pages for First John.
Nice.
So it's the same commentary that I used when we went through Romans. What's funny is just to, that's just First John. Of course, there's Second John and Third John. So I went to get the commentaries for Second John, Third John. So I picked this up for the commentary for Third John. And if you look closely, it's actually the commentary for John chapter 3. So sometime we're going to have to study John so I can take advantage of having that commentary. But actually, he didn't write commentaries for John chapter 2 and 3, so we'll have to wing it when we get there. Or actually, I'll be using different commentaries. But anyway, that's just interesting. All right, so Proverbs. To finish up Proverbs and put a bow on it, I just want to go through. And by the way, I've got these bulletized. I'm glad to send this out to you if it's useful, so those of you who take notes, if you don't want to take notes on all this stuff, I'm glad to just send it out. I'd put it up on the screen, but then you would read instead of listening to me, and that always makes me do this glitchy thing. All right, anyway, Proverbs. The first thing is, it's all about wisdom, right? And what is wisdom? The definition that I like is seeing things from God's perspective. And I think that the thing that got added on as we went through Proverbs on several different places was it's seeing things from God's perspective and then doing something about it and then acting on it. It's proactive, not just learning and sitting back. It's seeing things from God's perspective and then acting on it. The other thing early on in the first couple of lessons, we recognize that there are patterns in God's creation. And if you follow those patterns, it leads to an abundant life here, and abundant life hereafter. So there are patterns, or sometimes we call them principles, sometimes we call them proverbs, right? Because Proverbs tells us what those patterns are. Now, one key distinction we made early on that became important as we got into the details was the Proverbs are not promises. They are principles and not promises, right? Because we live in a fallen world, because we live in a world that Satan is in charge of, this is the best that you can do in following after God and doing what he wants, but it doesn't mean they're not promises of what might happen in your life, because Satan's still messing with things. The next thing was Jesus is wisdom. Right? Jesus is wisdom. When we start talking about wisdom and getting wisdom and gaining wisdom and learning wisdom, it's really about gaining Christ and learning Christ and knowing Christ. So those things are connected. The other key thing is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? The fear of the Lord, understanding who he is, getting close to the Lord, an awe of the Lord, passionate about the Lord. That's the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of knowing Christ, right? The two things are connected. Another bullet that I copied down was what level of what level of desperation do you have for gaining wisdom? What level of desperation do you have for gaining Christ, for knowing who he is, for getting closer to him? It was a key message. One was on being careful of weighing other people's values, other people's value, right? Make sure you're using God's scale when you weigh other people's value, not your own prejudice, not your own background, not your own history, but how does God value them? Next, we're stewards of God's blessings, time, talent, money, opportunities. And then the follow on, what are you doing with them? What are you doing with the blessings that God has given to you as a steward? Because, another point near the end is he wants to give you more so that you can be a steward, so that you can bless others. Which connect to the next one, which we're supposed to be life to others. We're supposed to be a blessing to others. Next, evil is not passive. Evil is not passive. And if you are passive, evil will overtake you. That's why you've got to be desperate about gaining wisdom, knowing Christ, learning more about him. Otherwise, evil just creeps up on you and overtakes you. Another important bullet, you don't know what's going on in other people's lives, in their hearts. So treat everyone with compassion. And this is where turn the other cheek is so important. It's not about you, it's about them. Turn the other cheek because you don't know what's going on. You don't know the mess. You don't know what just happened to them. You know the argument they're in the middle of. Nextly, following these principles, following these proverbs is impossible without Christ, right? This is not something you just grunt and do better. Next, discernment is critical to the Christian life, whereas judgment and condemnation is an abomination to God. And figuring that out takes wisdom. When are you being discerning and when are you being judgmental? When are you being condemning of another person? And when are you being discerning about what you do, who you go, who are you around, what do you listen to, etc. Another principle we ran into was watch the gap. God gives you a gap between something that happens to you and your response. And part of our maturing as a Christian is to increase that gap so that you have time to give the right response rather than the human knee-jerk response. Another thing I tried to beat into your heads is that you are elite Christians. You have amazing insight, learning, wisdom to bring life to others, right? To bring life to other people. Connected with that was the whole issue of you are precious, you are rare, you are elite. You got to get a hold of that and recognize that God has placed you where you are in the time that you are with what you have learned, what you know, in order to influence others' lives. Another thing we ran into was forgiveness is not a two-player game. It's a one-player game, right? You are to forgive, regardless of whether the other person is forgivable or wants your forgiveness. Your job is to forgive and not be bitter, not hold on to it. Connected to that is don't take offense, right? Taking offense when other people do whatever, say whatever. You have no right to take offense. You have no right to take offense. Another one, God made the poor. He's watching over them and he's waiting for you to help them. God made them. God made you where you are. God gave you the blessings you have. God made them where they are, and he's watching over them. He's waiting for you to step in. Again, maybe some of these are saying the same things in a different way, but the person that hurt you has a need. And the question is, how will you respond? The person that hurt you in some way hurt you because he has a need. And how are you going to respond? How are you going to minister? Quote, I was just kidding, unquote. The Bible describes that as firebrands, arrows, and death. Be careful of your, I was just kidding. This is one of those 4 fingers pointed back at me and one pointed at you. Next one, God is angry with the wicked every day. I know I like that one maybe more than I should, but God is, he knows. He knows what the wicked are doing. He's aware. He's angry with them. Next, know the condition of your flock, the people that you influence, the people that are looking up to you, the people that are watching your steps. Do something about it. Next, fear God, fear God, and then you don't have to fear anything else, right? Fear God. You don't have to fear this world. You don't have to fear what's going to come around the corner. If you're living in fear of God, You don't have to fear anything else. Next was, you can know everything that matters. You know, the Bible actually says you know everything that matters. You know all. And that's all because we have God living within us. We have the Holy Spirit. You know it all. You're blocking it from usefulness, but you know it all. The litmus test for being righteous or wicked is one's involvement with the innocent poor. The litmus test for being righteous or wicked is one's involvement with the innocent poor. We had this in 2 different lessons about who commends you, who says what an amazing person you are, who helps you, who encourages you, and then who hates you, who is annoyed by you, who is frustrated by you. Both of those things tell you something about you. I referred to this earlier, but God wants to give us so much more than we're actually willing to get. And then we ended with the virtuous woman and the virtuous man are impossible standards without the fear of the Lord. Right? Without the fear of the Lord, without knowing Christ. And this is just true of everything in Proverbs, all of the principles, everything that we've learned, all of it is impossible. Without the fear of the Lord, i.e., without wisdom, i.e., without Christ, all of this is impossible. And if we try to do it all in our own strength, in our own power, and grunting and trying to make it happen, not going to happen. What we got to do is get more fear of the Lord, get more understanding of who he is. All right, that is my summary of Proverbs. Any other things that just jump into your head? You said, boy, this was something that really impacted me as we went through it. You've already forgotten Proverbs, is that right? I mean, let me just say this. I found it incredibly painful to go through. It was a very tough study for me. But at the same time, there was a lot of cool stuff in it, as we've just read here, a lot of stuff that I needed to hear. It's one of those things where I wish I had heard it all when I was a teenager or a young adult, because there's a lot of principles of life in there that I think that's actually how it was written for training, training in high school or training in college. So anyway, that's Proverbs. Anything else before we move on?
Hey, Rich, I'm just like everybody in class. We've all read Proverbs many times, but I do appreciate your study and what you came up with. It certainly helped me out. I do appreciate it.
Same with me. I mean, again, that I do this study for me to learn. And, Proverbs has always been, you jump in, you get one verse, you jump back out. I mean, to actually go through it and get the focus of it, to me was powerful for me. So thank you, Tim, but I appreciate that.